Hello, Jordan Sheridan, live with Louis DeAngelis. It is a lovely day in the United Corporations of America, 5 o'clock Eastern. A lot going on. I know the Democrats and Republicans, those bastions of a representative democracy, are on the House floor, I believe, fighting over the debt ceiling, which we covered yesterday. Just an absurd, unnecessary thing. So if you missed that live stream, it's up on the channel with Steve Grumbine explaining why this whole sordid conflict was totally unnecessary and will only hurt the poor. There's also pretty, I'd say, major, possibly game over kind of developments in the classified document case related to former President Trump that kind of blows up his whole, well, I waved a magic wand and declassified all these documents. So if we have time, we'll get to that a little bit later. What else is going on? Oh, Mike Pence is
Yes.
going to be running for president. That has been announced. Well, he hasn't announced it, but there's reports that he's going to be running. It's kind of a batshit political world when like Mike Pence, a loony Christian fundamentalist, like national abortion ban, Jesus told us to do everything, is considered like the moderate of this group.
Yeah.
Also not a fan of gay people, I should say too. So what else? Chris Christie's getting in. So there's a lot to cover. But obviously, Lewis leading the charge. We've been continuing to cover the East Palestine derailment and uncontrolled detonation. And we have obtained from the East Palestine Fire Department. So credit to them for being transparent and providing it when we asked. What is it, 9 hours of
It
dispatch?
it is 9 hours. I did not get a ton of sleep last night. I was up very late, kind of starting to go through it. Still have more to go. But yeah, I'm about a little less than halfway through some of it, and we're definitely starting to put some of the pieces together as far as what went on the night of the derailment, some of the initial confusion that was going on, actually even hearing some of the first 911 calls as to folks calling in and alerting that this derailment happened. Some interesting messages from Norfolk Southern mixed into it. So yeah, we'll have a lot to get into with all of these calls, and more to come that even you or I don't know about yet, because we still have hours of this to go through at this point.
Yeah. And we think, fingers crossed, we think we're going to have a former firefighter on because some of the clips we're going through, I mean, Lewis and I could very well point out the inconsistencies and red flags,
Mm-hmm.
but we wanted to have a firefighter on who could better explain why some of these things don't make sense. So we'll get into all that, but also a public service announcement, and I will be pushing this throughout the broadcast. Today is the final day of May. And if you believe in miracles, Lewis, we're currently 14 members away, 14 paid members away from hitting our goal for the month of May of 125 paid members. It's been done before. There's been days we've added 30 to 40 paid
Mm-hmm.
members. So 14, not easy. 100 watching right now. I guarantee you there's 14 of you that have not signed up yet. But super important to hit this goal. We just spent, well, it's going through, but we just spent 15,000 on a new live view. We have some plans for the summer, which would probably be at least 3 or 4 on the ground reporting trips. Obviously, continuing to pay freelancers like John Farina, Lewis, Tina. We want to send back on the road soon. So if it's within your means, help us reach our goal, statuscoup.com/join. Also, this kind of reporting that we're going to show you today, we could have never done without sending Lewis to East Palestine or me to Flint. And that takes money, and that's paid for by you, the members. So we'll give you shout outs for every person that signs up. You could sign up through our website, that's statuscoup.com/join, or through YouTube, whichever one you prefer. And we'll give you shout outs. So let's get to it. I think Jack is there. I think Colin tested with
Can you
him.
hear me?
Hey there, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Thanks for hauling ass to get there with us. I know you're busy. So let's give people the bio. You were a former firefighter with the Chippewa, Pennsylvania Fire Department. Tell us kind of the milestones of your career there.
Basically, again, like you said, I was in for 14 years. I've received and hold multiple certifications through the fire department, including technical rescue, vehicle rescue, obviously structure firefighting. We've done building collapse, farm rescue, you name it. And obviously on the subject, we've covered multiple train derailments and incidences involving Norfolk Southern and the railroad.
Gotcha. So I want to start with we were hearing a lot of I wouldn't say a lot, but we were hearing kind of whispers that hours after this fire started, that Norfolk Southern, almost like acting as the incident commander, was sending first responders away. Which I'm not an expert, but a fire is inherently dangerous, so I assume there's only rare reasons you would send first responders away from a fire, because obviously it's dangerous and they understand that. I want to play, we're going to try to go in order of the clips. This is from the 9 hours of radio dispatch. We've only skimmed the surface. This is all within like the first few hours. But I want to play, this part here for you.
Norfolk wants you to shut down, get out of the elements, take your truck. He wants all manpower in their truck. I got to get hold of Greg and tell them to do the same thing. They want everybody out of the element right now. They want everybody in a vehicle. All right?
And
so,
in case you had a hard time hearing there too, it's Norfolk wants you to shut down, get out of the elements. Everybody needs to get into a vehicle. And whoever it is on the radio there is specifically saying Norfolk wants you to shut down, get out of the elements, get into a vehicle. That is tough to hear for folks.
And by the way, there's a lot of crosstalk on these dispatches. So some of the clips you'll hear well. Some of them, there's different channels going at the same time. But this was at 12:33 a.m. We say 12:33 a.m., give or take a few minutes, because we might be off by 2 or 3 minutes. But roughly 12:33 a.m., which would be,
Right.
almost 3 hours and 40 minutes since this derailment. So why would Norfolk Southern, because we're going to show in other clips, at that point, the consensus was the fire had been contained, which you could say what that means. But if the fire has been contained, why would Norfolk Southern be telling first responders to get back to their trucks?
To be honest with you, at least in my past history of being at an almost exact incident, like I was explaining to you guys before, back in 2006, we had a train derailment in New Brighton that involved ethanol. And there were several tankers that had come off the railroad tracks and went down into the bank of the Beaver River, and massive fire, same situation. The emergency blow-offs that they had on the tanker cars were working just fine. And from what I've seen photo-wise of the East Palestine incident, the rail cars were not even close to being as damaged as they were in New Brighton. And that chemical ethanol is just as explosive as what was in East Palestine. We were never told to evacuate the area. We were just basically told to step back from the scene a little bit, but continue our operations in cooling down the tanker cars and suppressing the fire. And obviously, from videos and everything like that, the fire, at least from what I saw, was not fully suppressed at that time. So for them to give that order and it come from Norfolk Southern, that doesn't make any sense, because ultimately, besides the information that is going towards the first responders, the ultimate decision of the fire suppression should be up to the incident commander, which I'm guessing would have been Keith Drabeck at the time. But yeah, for Norfolk Southern to actually give that order, for them to evacuate and get in their vehicles. To me, that doesn't really make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we should also say the firefighter has now acknowledged that he wasn't there at that point. He was out of town. So
the fire chief.
Okay, well, yeah, whoever at that time was the incident commander.
Right, should have been the one.
They should have gathered information again, like what we were saying earlier. The conductor and the engineer should have been there to give the initial first responders the information of the manifest of what was in those tankers. After that, it's up to the fire department to decide what their operations are going to be and how they're going to handle it. They should have at least had basic knowledge of the emergency valves on those tanker cars and know whether or not they were levying off or anything like that. But I mean, from everything I saw video wise, there was no legit reason for them to evacuate that area that soon without the fire being completely fully suppressed.
Right. One clarifying question for you. So you said you've worked on train derailments, other hazardous incidents, plenty of fires, all this sort of stuff. Has there ever been an instance where the owner of the facility or if it's a factory or a business or a derailment, where the owner of the facility in that case ever makes the call like that? Because that seems wild to me. You said that it seemed out of the ordinary, but has that ever happened before to you?
No, never on an incident that I've been in. Again, their responsibility should have just been to give information on the manifest, what kind of chemicals were in the cars. And ultimately, again, the fire suppression should have been 100% in charge in the fire department standpoint. That should not have been a decision that Norfolk Southern made. The only decision that they should have been involved with, which I'm sure obviously they were, was them putting that shape charge on the tank and blowing it up. But, I mean, even then, it still should be coordinated with the fire department, and that decision should have been made by both parties.
Right.
And let's play the second part to that, because this is also, I believe, first responders saying we're shutting down after Norfolk Southern stated so.
We're shutting down right now, getting out of the element. If you can just do whatever you can to protect your trucks from freezing and overheating, we're just going to stand by for right now. Copy that. I'll shut the line down now.
And again, in case folks are having a hard time hearing, they're generally saying, this is a firefighter on the radio saying, we're pulling back, do whatever you can to prevent your engines from freezing or overheating. For folks, it was single digits that night, so 7 degrees. In some of these radio communications, there's a lot of conversation about frozen hoses and all of that sort of stuff.
So can I ask you, when they're saying getting out of the elements, do you infer that as getting out of the temperature or getting out of the fire?
Well, on Norfolk Southern standpoint, if they're the ones that are claiming that, they were giving the order to get out of the elements, the only thing I can think of is them talking about a vapor leak out of one of the tanker cars and the possibility of that combusting. But then again, I'm sorry, with the amount of fire that was on scene there, there's no way that would have been a possibility. There's no way.
Another.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just
no.
I'm sorry. You go first.
It just also seems odd to me because from multiple people Lewis has spoke with, I've spoken with, around this time, they're saying the fire was contained. And I was told by other first responders that if a fire is contained, that's kind of when you put your foot on the gas, no pun intended, and you throw more resources at it if you have them. So
Absolutely.
if the fire's contained, wouldn't pulling resources off it risk it getting out of control again?
100%. Yeah. No, the basic last resort they should have been doing is hitting those tanker cars from a distance with what we call a deck gun or a stinger, where it's a portable, basically water cannon that you can set up, and the distance that it can flow water gives you a safe gap in between you and the incidents, and still allows you to continue to keep cooling those tanks and continuing to make sure that there's no secondary flare-ups or anything like that. So that just, to me, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Well, it makes sense if you maybe are a little more cynical of a person and maybe think Norfolk Southern, for some reason, wants the fire to continue or get worse.
Yeah, I mean, again, that could be a possibility.
We'll get to that
Absolutely.
later. Lewis, you're up next.
Nope.
I think he'll be back.
Yeah, he'll probably pop back in here. Another area that I guess that we can pop into here, obviously, like getting a hold of what is on board the train is kind of a major area of importance here. The first responders need to know what is there, and it seems like there was a lot of issues surrounding actually getting the manifest in hand. As well as where, how they're obtaining the manifest. So I'm going to play 2 clips here. The first one is in regards to trying to track down the actual conductor of the train, the person who's in the front of it. Some of the early reports, I'll let folks listen to it, but they didn't really know where the conductor actually was. We can go ahead and listen.
There's nothing hooked to the train. It's just sitting here by itself. The main train is gone.
So you can hear there, they were, any luck with the conductor was the first question, and then eventually it says the main train is gone. From my understanding, it is protocol to actually to unhook the front of the train and pull forward a bit.
Absolutely, yeah.
Gotcha, but they shouldn't just disappear, right?
No, for them to completely leave the scene without coordinating with first responders and giving them the information of what's in those cars. No, that's unless their SOPs have changed, which that again doesn't make any sense.
Right.
They should not have just up and left like that without coordinating with the first responders.
Right.
Well, I also want to point out, I think the times to this is important that we marked it down, because that's at give or take 9:18 p.m. So we're talking about a half hour after the derailment.
Right.
So at least the emergency responders, unless this is a bad case of one hand isn't talking to the other one, at least the emergency responders have not been approached by the conductor or the engineer for at least a half hour. But a couple minutes later, if this was the next clip you were going to play, Lewis, a couple minutes later, somebody on the dispatch, and again, we can't identify who's talking on the dispatch, says this.
There's a conflict here. I'm not sure exactly where it's derailed. We're trying to get eyes on it now.
Okay.
So yeah, there's hazardous materials scattered throughout the whole train.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
MS Police, do we need to send this concept anywhere?
What was that? Absolutely. The fire department needs to fax it or email it.
And again, just to recap that for folks, because I know some of this is difficult to hear. I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but in general, there's somebody on the radio with dispatch saying there's a contest here. I'm not sure where the train derailed, so it seems like they're trying to figure out which cars actually derailed, which ones are there. But he makes the statement that there are multiple hazardous cars spread throughout the entire train, and they're not sure where it derailed. And then at the end of it, they're asking, is there somewhere we need to send this to, essentially. I mean, in your experience, would a manifest or a consist, those words seemingly seem to be used interchangeably a bit, but would that normally be something that would be handed from a conductor? Is that, what sort of normal communication would be happening there?
Well, initially, at least again, the incident that I was at New Brighton, right after the derailment happened, and they did separate the locomotive from the initial derailment. As soon as they moved it up several hundred yards up the track, the conductor and the engineer both got out and coordinated with the incident commander, the chief of New Brighton's fire department, immediately informed them of what was inside those tanks. And basically, after that, it's up to us to formulate a plan how we're going to attack, whether we're going to use water, foam, whatever. We're going to basically overlook all of the tanker cars in the incident and figure out whether or not it's safe to how close we need to be. But no matter what, there has to be some type of water suppression being put on that to prevent further explosions or causing harm to local residents in the area.
Right.
So the question is, according to the Daily Beast, I guess not the Daily Beast, the Daily Mail, they got this dispatch. They didn't really report like a lot of the stuff we're reporting, but they kind of talked more about the evacuation talk that was on dispatch. But according to them, in an email to dailymail.com, Chief Drayback said, all information as to what was contained in the train was provided to the officer in charge of the scene initially by a representative of Norfolk Southern. This information was given to the officer in charge approximately 30 to 45 minutes into the incident to the bell. I don't know how he knows that because he wasn't there for several hours. He was out of town. But if he's saying between 30 and 40 minutes, well, that kind of tracks with there's a consist here, which we played. And he says there's hazardous materials scattered all across the train. Well, if they have something, if they have what's in the train for 40 minutes after the derailment, why is it then that 3 hours later at like 12:30 a.m. they're sending the first responders away like we talked about? And according to the mayor, who I'm not saying he lied, because obviously this is a chaotic situation and maybe there's communication, maybe communication is not getting to everybody, but the mayor will play the clip. He's talking to ABC News, which was showing on the which was playing on the radio dispatch. And he says, he's asked why are the firefighters being sent away? And he answers,
at this point, would you say that the fire is contained? Is it ongoing?
It's ongoing. It's contained. It's ongoing. They've pulled some of the firefighters back to just protect some of the outbuildings till we get a better grasp on what exactly we're dealing with. I think only one actual building was involved as of right now, and they are working to contain that. So.
What was the reasoning for withdrawing the fire department?
Just till we get a better grasp of what exactly is what chemical is burning.
Yeah. So again, the mayor saying we're trying to get a grasp of what chemicals were burning. But to Jordan's point, they said that they had the consist in hand around 9:40 p.m. That interview right there was around 12:40 in the morning, just after midnight. That seems a bit off, no?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I mean, I can see them basically expanding resources, like what he'd mentioned about doing basically property protection, sending other crews to help, suppress a building fire or help keep, the heat away from exterior buildings and everything like that. But yeah, that doesn't make any sense. If they already had the manifest of the chemicals in those cars at whatever 9:30 p.m., for them to do that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Right.
And could he have been referring to when he's saying what chemicals are burning? Could it be that they know what chemicals are on the train, but they're trying to identify like which of the cars are burning, meaning which chemicals are burning? Because not every car was on fire.
Right. In a situation like that, that's not really a concern. Your main focus is, it was pretty obvious where the main majority of the fire was, and that's where their focus should have been, suppressing and keeping cool. Again, that doesn't really make any sense for them to try and directly figure out which tanker car was leaking, because ultimately they're really honestly not going to know that until they're able to get somebody in there close enough to see that. And you need to really suppress the fire in order to do so.
Right. So it's not like they would have been like changed. If it was the vinyl chloride car that was the one that was leaking at that point versus the butyl acrylate car or one of the other ones, it wouldn't have changed their game plan at all, basically.
No. Nope. No, your main objective in that situation doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter what's in those cars. Your ultimate goal is to suppress the fire and cool those cars down.
Mm-hmm. And can we go back to the engineer and the conductor? Because something that seems strange to me is, it's protocol to separate from, the engineer and the conductor at the front of the car. If there's a fire, you're supposed to separate from the cars that are on fire. Maybe go like 1,000 yards, I was told, but like stay on site. But as far as I could tell, we don't know where they went. I asked Norfolk Southern. I'm not holding my breath for them to respond because they haven't responded to anything else I've asked. We don't know if they came back, when they came back, who provided the manifest. Because also, from what Lewis and I know, first responders were not wearing the proper masks for those chemicals for hours.
Right.
So if they had the manifest within a half hour to 40 minutes, it seems like you'd want to tell your first responders to put on the proper equipment.
Yeah, to add more to that too. I mean, I spoke directly with a first responder who was on scene the night of, and this person told me that they had the right equipment inside of their truck that they could have used, and they could have been wearing had they known what it was. They were pulled off around 12:30 or so to go move to their vehicles. We heard some of that, call from earlier. They very well, they were not. They had no idea which chemicals they were being exposed to at that point in time. According to that person who was there the night of, they were still, we don't know what it is. We don't know what it is. They supposedly had the equipment in their truck that they could have put on, but they didn't because they weren't told what chemicals they were dealing with at that point.
To me, I'm not gonna lie, and that could have been a screw up on the fire department side. But no matter what, they should have had their SCBAs on. It doesn't matter what you're rolling up to in a fire like that. You should at least have your SCBA on and your mask ready in case. Especially, I mean, again, watching video, they knew there were tanker cars on fire. So you got to know offhand that there's some type of chemical burning there. So that, I mean, again, to me, that doesn't really make any sense. They should have been prepped and ready. And especially my fire department that I was in, Chippewa, pretty positive they responded. They have an air unit that is basically sent to scenes like this to constantly refill air bottles to make sure everybody's supplied with fresh O2 and everything like that. Right. So for them to say that they were leaving their equipment in the truck, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay. And I mean that's from one specific source. We've been talking to others as well. I wanted to put that out there to see if you had thoughts on it. So,
I mean, it could be a possibility. I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of departments out there that aren't the most professional and don't do things the way they should be done. But they should have been prepped and ready for that.
So I'm about to be very crass. You probably don't know me, but so you have Norfolk Southern who derailed his car. We got the engineer and the engineer and the conductor MIA, unless we're told something different. We don't know where they were. We have somebody is telling dispatchers we have a consist here and there's hazardous chemicals all across this train. At least 40 minutes after the derailment, but then 3 hours later, we've spoken with first responders who still don't know what's on the train. And at least the mayor, I don't have any reason to believe he's lying, seems to still have a question or think that the first responders have been sent away because we're not sure what's on that train. So devil's advocate could say, well, Jordan, maybe nothing sinister is going on. Maybe this is just a giant chaotic clusterfuck and one hand doesn't know what the other's doing, etc. But something that keeps gnawing at me is, why, if the fire is contained, which we've heard from multiple people, and the mayor is saying it's contained, would you send first responders away when, by the radio dispatch, there were other departments calling dispatch saying, we've got tankers here if you need them. They had resources to keep fighting the fire. Why? I mean, you can't get into a corrupt corporate villain's head, but to me, this is like the rapist being invited to the hospital to organize the rape kit. Why would Norfolk Southern be direct telling people to leave? And why would first responders? I'm not saying they shouldn't have listened. I mean, they were volunteers for the most part, but why would you send first responders away? The only reason I could think of is what you said. Maybe there's a leak, or maybe you want those cars to heat up for some reason.
And I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, it's really boiling in my head too, trying to figure that out, because again, none of that makes any sense whatsoever. I don't know. Honestly, I really don't know how to explain that one.
Yeah.
I mean,
it really... in your experience, what would be a circumstance where not the company, but like your chief would tell you, get back to your car? What would be the circumstances where you'd be called off?
Is the only time you would get called off in a situation like that is if you are unable to get the fire under control and you feel as though you are literally in immediate danger of those cars blowing up. Which, again, I mean, obviously from the reports, they're claiming that the fire was under control and suppressed. And that right there would be the only reason they should have been backing away from that fire. That's the only reason. But for them to call it off like that, whenever, again, the reports are saying that the fire was almost under control, that doesn't make any sense at all. And again, you know, going back to the beginning, pre-derailment, I mean, from what I'm hearing, both the engineer and conductor knew of the issues that were going on with these cars, and apparently the bearings and the wheels or whatever it was, like they knew there was something wrong, and that's leading me to believe that's the reason why they booked it out of there, to let somebody else higher up kind of take the reins and see what they can do with it.
And I spoke with somebody from the railroad industry who told me it's not actually the crew, it's not the engineer or conductor that makes the decision to leave. It would be their dispatcher. Norfolk Southern's dispatcher would tell the engineer and conductor, hang around for a bit or proceed to your final destination, which was Conway, the big rail yard in So, you know, in fairness, it's not real. You know, I'm not saying the conductor and engineer. It was Norfolk Southern who either told them to scoot or stay. But it seems odd to me. And how did they get the manifest if the conductor and engineer didn't stick around?
Yeah, see, and that's another thing that I'm kind of boggling in my head too, is unless somebody from Norfolk Southern contacted them via over the phone, that's a pretty damn quick response time from somebody to make it from Conway to East Palestine to hand them the manifest of that train. That doesn't make any sense to me. And again, that's not standard operating procedure. Why do it this time? There's too many variables that are involved in this situation for it to be a normal everyday train derailment.
Is there other clips you want to play, Lewis?
I'm trying to think. I don't know what Jack has for time here. We have some other clips. Let's play. I'm trying to think of the most focused ones while we've got him with us. Let's see. The mayor was actually asked on that same call that we played earlier at 12:41 in the morning. It's directly about vinyl chloride, actually, by this ABC journalist. And the mayor hadn't mentioned it at this point yet. Let's just go ahead and listen to that clip.
Would you be able to confirm confirm that the train was carrying vinyl chloride chemicals or no?
I can't confirm that. I've heard that. I've been asked from a couple different people. I cannot confirm that as of right now, because I have not been told that that is the exact chemical that was being involved.
And again, I mean, we can't necessarily fault the mayor for not necessarily knowing all of this at this point, but if they had the manifest at 9:30, again, it's just kind of another piece of information to show that, either there was some major miscommunications going on, which very well could be the case, or the manifest was not getting to the right people. I'm not sure, but it was interesting that a journalist could find out that it was vinyl chloride at midnight the night of, but the mayor who was handling press for this did not know. Seems to be a bit of a red flag.
100%. Absolutely.
Well, the other thing also is, and again, I don't know the mayor, so I don't have any reason to think he's lying, but you have to wonder if it's an open question where the engineer and conductor went, or how long they remained in East Palestine versus just continuing on. And we know that Norfolk Southern isn't the one that told the public that vinyl chloride was on the train. It was the governor on Monday who said
days later
vinyl chloride was on the train. It kind of adds up to, if the mayor wasn't told at that point that there's vinyl chloride on the train, and Norfolk Southern isn't the one who publicly said it, it was the governor. Could it be that Norfolk Southern was hoping that we could just sweep this under the rug, not tell folks what's on that train? And, this is flyover country. Fuck them.
Yeah, this smells like a massive cover-up. And again, looking at how quick in this, the amount of derailments that I've been on before, they have never, ever had it cleaned up that quick. And if rail lines needed replaced, it's never happened that fast, ever.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I want to ask one more question here, too, with one more of these clips. And the time is important here. So Norfolk Southern calling everybody off, essentially, was at, I believe this was around 12:30 or so. Jordan, correct me if I'm wrong there. 12:30 or so, Norfolk Southern made the call for everybody to essentially pull back. Then at 1:26 in the morning, so an hour later, after people had been told to pull back, and it had gone over the radio more than one occasion at that point, a call went over that Norfolk Southern, it says, and you'll hear in this, it says per NS, obviously NS standing for Norfolk Southern, they were asking to put out what I believe are some railroad ties. We'll go ahead and play that one.
0501. Go ahead. Per NS, they want a engine down here at Pleasant Drive to put out all these railroad ties. They do not want these burning. So if we can get an engine, if they want one hand line off to put out these railroad ties down here at Pleasant Drive. All right, I just got back up to the command post. I'll take care of that.
So that is, again, over the radio, per NS, Norfolk Southern asking an engine to go put out some railroad ties. To me, it seems like the railroad ties are probably along the side of the tracks. They didn't want these railroad ties on fire. If they were having issues and concerns about firefighters' safety or something blowing up, it doesn't make sense to me that an hour later the situation would have changed nearly enough to send them in to go put out some railroad ties on the side of the tracks.
That sounds like they're just protecting their way of being able to get that line back up and running ASAP.
Right.
100%.
Yeah.
And can I ask you, just like, this is more of a psychological question, but the first responders Lewis spoke with, I spoke with, I guess they were under the impression that Norfolk Southern was sending them off for their safety. I don't really believe that a railroad company would give a fuck about their safety. The railroad company cares about the safety of their shareholders before human beings. So how does that square that the first responders are saying Norfolk Southern is sending us off, we're getting out of the element? The only thing I can think of is maybe Norfolk Southern thought there was going to be an explosion and these firefighters are going to die, and maybe Norfolk Southern would have liability. I don't know, but it just doesn't strike me that Norfolk Southern would be so concerned with the first responder safety?
That according to them, whenever they made that call, the fire was technically already in a safe state to where there shouldn't have been any type of hazard of explosion or anything like that. That doesn't make any sense at all. Doesn't make any sense.
Right.
None of that adds up. I mean, that just, I don't even know how to explain that one, to be honest with you.
Can we talk about something else? And, you know, we don't have proof that this is a reason, but we do know, and you and I spoke about this. This is a very important line for Norfolk Southern. This line is bringing military weaponry that comes west from Lima, Ohio, through this route to the East Coast and then ultimately to Ukraine. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because this is coming from some of the Abrams Army tanks that are manufactured in Lima, Ohio. Again, I'm not saying this had anything to do with it, but we do know this route transports these Abrams Army tanks.
Yeah, well, I find it pretty convenient that separate of this train derailment, and lately, especially with everything going on, I keep tabs on everything that's going on overseas and everything like that. Separate of the train derailment, I've seen several articles about literally the same timeline whenever the train derailment happened, us planning on sending a batch of Abrams over to Ukraine to help out with that incident. And that's just too sweet of a scenario to me to it not have anything to do with what went on.
And I spoke with
looking at how quick they replaced that line. What was that? I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, I spoke with someone who said it's not easy to reroute it. Like if you had to close this line, it's not easy to reroute. Again, those Abrams Army tanks are being made in Lima, Ohio, at a plant that's actually a U.S. Army owned plant. And it's going through this Norfolk Southern route. So if you had to shut down this Norfolk Southern route, it's not just like snap your fingers and reroute it on another route. It's not logistically so easy to do that.
Cost them more time and money, but you got to think they're going to have to additionally reroute other trains that are utilizing other routes.
Right.
You know, that is just to me at least a logistic nightmare.
And before we let you go, and Lewis, jump in if you have other stuff.
And,
but,
again, the timeline, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. We know how things are going with our own government right now and how the action good.
You're a little spotty at the moment.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
But yeah, like I was saying, it just, to me, it's too convenient of a situation the way things are going timeline wise with them sending everything to the East Coast and, over eventually to Ukraine. And again, the timeline of them putting in those tracks, it just, to me, that adds up too much than anything else.
Gotcha.
I'm not trying to sound like Captain Conspiracy here, but I mean,
well, there's no there's no conspiracy. The facts are the facts. These Abrams Army tanks are going through this route. I mean, that's a fact. We don't know if that had anything to do with any of the decisions that were made, but it is relevant that the timing, these Abrams Army tanks were being shipped to Ukraine. Lewis, you have other questions?
I mean, even beyond that, it's a busy route with a lot of money of goods going through. Even forget about the tanks, like that could be very well be the thing. But in the couple times that I've been to East Palestine now, post derailment, those tracks are still nonstop all day, both directions. Obviously, it comes to so there are for Norfolk Southern to need to reroute everything off of this double-tracked section that runs through East Palestine to their major facility, not too far down. The track's cut 40 miles or so away, going other directions on tracks that are already probably busy, maybe aren't double-tracked everywhere else. Logistical nightmare. Obviously, they have an incentive to get this stuff rolling again. So otherwise, I don't think I have other questions for Jack at this point, but he's been very, very helpful with all this. Unless, Jordan, you've got something else you want to finish off with him.
Yeah, two other things. So we know that Norfolk Southern was burying contaminated soil to reopen the trains. So we have evidence that they did things that they shouldn't have done to try and accelerate the opening of this, which brings me to you and I off camera. We're talking about this vent and burn, which was really just an uncontrolled detonation. And you said you've never seen anything like that in all your years. It seems to me, how do you go from it's contained a couple hours after they send firefighters away, we think for like an hour or two. So we think that made it worse. So then there's chatter then on Saturday about we might need to vent and burn one of the cars. So then Sunday, we're definitely going to vent and burn one of the cars because it might have an uncontrolled explosion. The head of Pennsylvania's FEMA testified at one of the hearings that they pushed back once they were told about adding 4 extra cars to that. And Norfolk Southern could not articulate a reason, basically. They could not even articulate to them what other options they looked into, because you're supposed to try other safer options. So it just seems to me it went from 1 to 4 others. And why would you have to, for the first time in American history, have to detonate all these cars of these chemicals? And how did it go from one of the cars is going to explode imminently to 4 others are going to explode imminently? Does that make any sense to you?
No, honestly, to me, that only adds up to one thing, and that is just speeding up the burn and the expulsion of these chemicals in order for them to get that line up and running. Again, never in my history in the fire department or hearing of any other train derailment in America, if I heard them take a military-style explosive, a shape charge, and blow up a rail car to expel the chemicals in a rapid fashion. Especially whenever they knew that doing that to this specific chemical is going to make things worse. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make any sense at all to me, at all. And honestly, I would love to know who they got to come in there and place those charges, because I know that that's not a standard Norfolk Southern operation or a volunteer fire department operation.
Right.
When you're saying the chargers, you're meaning dig the ditch and put the explosions in it?
Yeah. The explosion that they put up next to the car to blow it up. Yeah, because I mean, basically, that's all a shape charge is it's an explosive that is meant to basically put all of its energy in one focused direction to make a specific hole and not create a massive explosion. It is basically a controlled explosion, but again, that's not something that Norfolk Southern does on the daily, and the fire department sure as hell didn't have anything to do with that either.
And my last question, and this is really just more from a big picture, human moral perspective. As I'm sure you know, in these kind of situations, there's a lot of first responders who know more than Lewis, I, and you. And for whatever reason, don't want to talk. We've met resistance, whether it be that their fire department put the fear of God in them, or maybe Norfolk Southern has put out kind of like a gag order, or they're afraid of retaliation in their main job, or name your reason. And I've kind of said to intermediaries who have spoken with the first responders, I'm not calling you guys bad people, but if you know they're lying and you know there's a cover up, I could tell you from my experience covering Flint and other things, you really only have a very short window to get to get justice. I mean, I don't know if you'll ever get justice because unfortunately there are going to get people that get cancer and die. Unfortunately, I know someone who's just brought their kid to the doctor and he was peeing out blood. We're not going to get full justice. But what would be your message? Obviously, you're a former firefighter, but to current firefighters, if they know that if they have information about some shady shit that went down, more that has been made public, why should they either speak with journalists or go public themselves and, let the chips fall where they fall?
I mean, to be honest with you, me previously living up there and coming from that area, I know how close-knit that community is. Most of the people in East Palestine and the surrounding communities, they all have each other's back, and they should. That's why I feel like there's a bigger agency at play here that is snuffing people's voices and putting the fear into them, because I can't honestly say I know for a fact, but I could talk to a lot of character that those people up there have. It's not like them to just up and roll over like this and try to hide information. I feel like something else bigger is going on behind the scenes that we're not being told about. Because even whenever me and you discussed about the air monitoring that was going on, standard procedure in any incidents like this, the local fire department should have control of going into its own residents' houses and checking the air. And whenever the EPA stepped in and said that they weren't allowed to do that, that again was a massive red flag to me.
Could you explain that for the audience who might not know that the EPA wouldn't allow that to happen?
Yeah, the EPA posted signs throughout the community, basically restricting anybody to have any outside agency come in and do air monitoring inside their houses. It had to be with a EPA resident or EPA representative only. And like I had requested, a friend of mine who's a firefighter up there that me and you talked about, I sent him a message and asked him if he was able to go in and do some air monitoring, and that's exactly what he told me was due to lawsuits and basically threats from the EPA. They were not allowed to go into residents and do any type of air monitoring. It all had to be EPA, and that's it.
And you have any thoughts on the fact that the EPA is moonwalking faster than Michael Jackson away from all of this and saying that they weren't consulted at all on the quote controlled burn? And then when we asked them, was it actually a prohibited open burn that's against your own regulations? They cited legal reasons that they couldn't answer us.
That's to me, that's a massive cover up, and it's just absolutely disgusting that they're handling the situation like this. It's absolutely horrible to me what they're doing to the people in that community. Absolutely horrible. It doesn't make any sense. They're absolutely not showing any type of concern for the residents or care. To me, it sounds like they're just trying to cover up cover-ups.
Thanks, man, for taking the time. Jack Van Kirk, who was in the Chippewa, Pennsylvania Fire Department. We should mention this extends well beyond East Palestine. Lewis has spoken with folks in Pennsylvania who are sick, that because they're out of the technical whatever mile marker, they can't get their wells tested, but they're sick. They're going to Norfolk Southern's reimbursement center and getting rejected because they're not in the mile zone. Like, the plume just kind of stopped at the invisible magic wall. So Pennsylvania is definitely part of this. And from folks I've talked to, possibly West Virginia and beyond. So, we'll just keep digging. And thank you, Jack, for it's good to have expertise from someone who's dealt with things like this.
Absolutely, no problem. I'm absolutely astounded that you guys are putting forth an effort to try and get to the bottom of this. You guys have my full respect, and if you guys have any other further questions, feel free to contact me.
Great. Thank you so much, Jack.
No
Take care.
problem. You too.
What a beard, too. What a beard.
I know. Jeez.
Fantastic. Couple things on that, and don't go anywhere. We're not done.
Mhm.
I know you got to go soon. Smash the like button. By the way, we haven't had any members sign up, so a collective, I will beg. We're 11 members away. 11 members away from hitting our goal for May. We wanted 125. We're at 111. So if you folks want more of this investigative reporting, if you want Lewis back in East Palestine, me back in Flint, Kalamazoo, we want to send Tina back on the road to Cop City. There's protests happening against Cop City later in June that we'd like to send her back there. 3 more activists were arrested down there yesterday, protesting against Cop City for the crime, literally the crime of I think it was handing out petitions or something like that in the neighborhood. They were arrested. There is straight up fascism going on down in Georgia and apparently elsewhere too. But my takeaways from this, and a few things. We reached out to the East Palestine Fire Department. We haven't heard back yet. Reached out to Norfolk Southern. I don't expect to hear back yet. But at the end of the day, I think the only way, and Lewis and I could tell the audience, I mean, the residents are not only struggling with the health problems, the mental health problems, the physical health problems that are getting worse on the physical end. They're also struggling, trying to get the media to care about this, trying to get the national media back into this. Yeah. And I had a conversation with a resident earlier, and I said, listen, you got a small window because national media basically collectively goes on vacation in July and August. Editors are gone. Executives are gone in their houses in the Hamptons. So that leaves June. And then after that, good fucking luck, because all they're going to be covering is DeSantis, first Trump, Biden, if they even bother covering the primary and the Democratic side, they're going to be covering the 2024 presidential election. And even if we get something juicy, it's going to be hard to get the national media back. Not that us breaking something isn't good, but obviously you want it to spread far and wide. Right. So I don't know your thoughts, but I think at this time we could do as much as we want, but in journalism, you need sources, and we have some, but there's a lot that are very hesitant to talk because I think for whatever reason, maybe their pride or maybe they don't want to be, they consider it, they don't want to be disloyal to their fire department. But at the end of the day, for the most part, and I'm not judging any of the first responders, but we're talking about your neighbors that are sick and gonna get sicker. We're talking possibly about you, because that's another thing, Lewis. A lot of these first responders are sick, which has not been covered.
Yeah, I mean, they were very sick initially. A lot of them are, many of them are still getting sick in some instances here. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that if you all want, if East Palestine wants the media to cover this in a bigger way, and like Jordan said, we're happy to continue covering it, but for folks in East Palestine's sake, I would be ecstatic if CNN started recovering this in a lot more detail, if Fox was covering it in more detail again. Right now, it's basically maybe you'll get a little bit of a blip of a story here or there. News Nation has done a couple good little stories on some of this, which is positive, but as of late, it doesn't seem like that's happening. And, if we can get some more of these folks to come forward, put your name on some of this stuff to get out there, you're absolutely going to be, you'll be on the right side of history, number one, for coming out and exposing some of this stuff. But number two, you will help get the media cavalry back into town. They pay attention to what we're doing. Jordan's partnered with big media outlets to get big stories out before. We would like to do it again, and it becomes much easier with this. And I think with some of this stuff that we've been going through right now, I mean, we played a handful of these recordings today, but there is a whole lot more where that came from. We just played some of them in the first couple hours of it. We still haven't even fully listened to the entirety. It's almost 9 hours of comments going back and forth. But to kind of answer your question on takeaways from this initially, for me, I mean, obviously we've kind of just been going through this, in the last 24 hours in particular, going through this in more detail. I really think the piece where we have at around 12:30, Norfolk Southern telling everybody get back, seemingly, everyone's under the impression that it's for safety reasons. And then an hour later, as we played when Jack was on, they're telling people to go up. They're telling firefighters to go back in to put out some railroad ties that are on fire. It can't be that much of a danger issue if it was resolved in an hour and you're worried about some railroad ties catching on fire, which that's a major.
Well, the bottom line is, and this isn't from one firefighter, this is from several.
Yeah.
It can't be that much of a safety issue if the fire is contained.
Right.
Meaning the fire is not out, but they have gotten it to a point where it is not spreading and getting worse. The safety issue would be you have all these first responders not wearing the proper gear for all of this toxic chemicals, which, as Lewis has pointed out, is right there in their trucks and they could put on. And I'm not saying it's an easy job or we should just dismiss, because it's not that they're safe. I mean, it's a massive fire. Of course, they're not completely safe, but I don't believe that Norfolk Southern sent them away for a safety reason, which
we haven't even been given a real reason, Yeah.
Right. And the mayor, benefited the doubt. I don't have any evidence that he was lying, but why wasn't the mayor definitively told that there's vinyl chloride on there? Because it sounds like he thinks there is, but it hasn't been confirmed to him, which kind of makes me think that Norfolk Southern was keeping the mayor in the dark. And then you have, we got to report further, but we've heard that when the fire chief Drayback arrived, which was around between 2 and 3 a.m., he had sent the firefighters back who were turned away. So apparently he knew that they shouldn't have been sent away. So the question is, why did Norfolk Southern send first responders away? And then you have to connect with the other dots. This is not the first person to say this is unprecedented and there was no reason that they had to blow up these trains. So then you get to, all right, and Lewis and I have talked about this amongst ourselves, but let's say they didn't send first responders away. Let's say they had you just fight the fire like you normally would. Well, let's then talk about timing, because if you don't have an imminent uncontrolled explosion and you don't have that as a rationale, talking about Norfolk Southern, then it's just a matter of we got to put the fire out, which might have been out by Sunday or Monday. And then you have to deal with OSHA, the EPA, cleanup. So it might take a little bit longer to reopen. Not, we don't know. We're not talking like weeks longer, but it might have taken, I don't know, a few more days to open up once you go through the red tape of, and having to do soil remediation. But we know these people are corporate psychopaths. So even an extra day might make them want to do something they shouldn't be doing and basically create a sacrifice zone. Because you also have to remember, Lewis, if the fire goes out and you're not blowing up the trains, you have to drain all the chemicals out of the trains.
Yep. Yeah, at this point, everything's kind of on the table still, and we're speaking. I've been speaking with a former EPA person who has a lot of experience in some of these cleanups, and he's like, well, the timing could take longer, but it also might be fairly similar. We've got other experts who are telling us, well, it actually would take much longer. So we're really trying to parse down what is the potential motive. We've still got a couple hours of some of this to listen to, so we might get more answers to some of these questions. But yeah, there's one thing I want to point out too. In our conversation with Jack, there was a question surrounding who actually placed the charges onto the train cars that were exploded. I'm still working on confirming this, but we got a text from Jamie, and she actually sent me a link to go with it. I believe it was a company out of Texas, SRS, who specialize in some of these emergency responses. We'll look into that, but that would track with what Jack is saying, that there's no way fire department's not going to roll in and do this, especially a small town fire department. We'll look more into that to see if we can get some more information out of that. But yeah, the motive here is still in question. There's obviously, money is absolutely in play. Rerouting things for a longer period of time would cost Norfolk Southern money. It might cost them customers in the long run if they can't continue to deliver goods on time. People are going to stop shipping with them. So yeah, still a lot of unanswered questions, unfortunately. But it feels like we're making a little bit of headway, but we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, because I know Lewis has to go. There's another story that We've been hearing for years the walls are closing in. The walls are closing in. I am very hesitant to ever say it's game over for Donald Trump because he seems to have 9 or 10 lives. I think it's game over based on this new report. And you're seeing all of these new reports with new information about the classified documents case, which tells me the Department of Justice is strategically just leaking its entire case right before they're going to indict him, because every story is worse than the other and more damning to the fact that I know we have some Trump MAGA people in the audience, but I mean, the facts are the facts. This is CNN, Trump captured on tape talking about classified documents he kept after leaving the White House. Federal prosecutors have obtained an audio recording of a summer 2021 meeting. So this is a year before Mar-a-Lago was raided and before he was subpoenaed for the documents, in which former President Trump acknowledges he held on to a classified Pentagon document about a potential attack on Iran. Multiple sources told CNN, undercutting his argument that he declassified everything. And that's why I think this is being leaked by the DOJ, because CNN is basically stating the DOJ's case by saying, undercutting his argument that he declassified everything. The recording indicates Trump understood he retained classified materials after leaving the White House, according to multiple sources. On the recording, Trump's comments suggest he would like to share the information, but he's aware of limitations on his ability post-presidency to declassify records, two of the sources says. CNN has not listened to the recording, but multiple sources described it. One source said the relevant portion of the Iran document is about 2 minutes long, and another source said the discussion is a small part of a much longer meeting. I mean, his defense that he just waved a wand and declassified it was obviously not going to work anyway.
Right. Yeah.
But if he's on tape stating these were classified documents and he's aware, I don't know what your possible defense would be.
Yeah, I don't know. Is it because I had been on the team that I thought that there's no way Trump ever goes to jail or is indicted on any of this. I was on that team for a while. I think I've seen that guy slip out of so many things, but this does feel a little bit like a more of a sure thing. I don't know how or why, but I feel like he always kind of gets himself out of whatever situation he's been in. But this feels like it's got more substance to it. I'd be curious to actually listen to it. I don't know if we'll get the chance to anytime soon.
I think it's a sure thing he's going to get indicted at this point.
Yeah.
Conviction is another thing, but at the end of the day, I think of all of the possible indictment, I think he's going to get indicted over the election in Georgia, those tapes where he's like, get me 11,000 votes. I don't know if he'll get convicted on that, but I think this is more likely to be convicted because in American history, if you piss off the CIA, the Pentagon, doesn't usually work out for you. Not that I'm pro CIA or anything, and he had on him documents about human sources, i.e. spies, at a time when more spies were dying, American spies were dying abroad. He had documents about nuclear programs. He apparently is saying, I'd like to share documents about an attack plan on Iran. So I don't know. I mean, I get the whole like, well, we don't want to set the precedent of going after former presidents and then it could be weaponized. But like, again, I think he's going to be indicted. But like, to me, I think Donald Trump would sooner kill himself than go to prison. So to me, this is the best chance Ron DeSantis has, which is scary because I actually think DeSantis is more scary than Trump, of beating Trump by kind of default, because I think Trump would make a deal of some glorified prison sentence, i.e. like
house arrest at Mar-a-Lago
house arrest and drop it and not be able to run for any office, which, you know, he could just spin off as the deep state, you know, finally, you know, Russiagate. And then it was the deep state. And he just drops out, you know, saying it was all a plot and they were declassified and, you know, whatever bullshit he spews. But bottom line, he goes back to, you know, whatever he was doing and doesn't have to serve a prison sentence. But an American, you know, the DOJ could say, we brought him to justice. See, no one's above the law. But I don't know how you get out of that if you're on tape saying they're not declassified, because there is no other defense then. So yeah, I think it will be, or actually somebody just brought it up. His only defense is hopes that the trial doesn't start until after the election, and then he just pardons himself, which he obviously would do.
I mean, that could happen. I don't know. Nothing would surprise me with him at this point. Like I said, I was kind of in the camp for a while of like, I don't see it happening. I see him going through, becoming the Republican nominee, and get himself out of anything. But yeah, I'll be curious to see where this one goes for sure.
I will say, watching DeSantis so far, I'm not impressed.
Yeah.
I think he's really overvaluing and overestimating how much this whole woke shit matters. Trump's rise in 2016 was based on the whole, the Mexicans are coming for you and the Muslims are coming for you. He didn't really focus that much on woke and this and that. That's a very online thing, but most of what I've seen from him is, I'm going to get to DC and eradicate the left, and we're going to destroy the woke mind virus and all that shit. I mean, that might be good for like Ben Shapiro's audience and Matt Walsh. I don't really think like blue collar people in the Rust Belt are more appealed to that.
I use I lived in New Hampshire for a long time, and I've got family in New Hampshire, many of them conservatives. They've got conservative friends, and I kind of use them as a barometer for some of this stuff. And last week when we were on talking about this on the night of DeSantis's announcement, I had said that a lot of them were actually like kind of ranking DeSantis above Trump as far as who they were going to vote for. And I'm not sure exactly where they are and who they would vote for at this point, but they sounded more undecided in the last couple days here because of that. They were saying the whole like woke side of all of this has gone a little bit too far. They don't think that is like should be the main focus, that they want these people to actually focus more on like conservative, like fiscal conservative policy is like a lot of like what these folks are focused on, not leading their campaign with abolishing woke or whatever the phrase that he used was. So yeah, I mean, I'll be curious to see where he tried to go from here. I also think that like they're all kind of smaller names, but I'm curious what happens with some of the polling and whatnot when Pence actually is in it. When did Tim? I don't even remember if Tim Scott officially announced yet. This is one that he's not going to really make any headways, but like the governor of New Hampshire is going to run as well, Chris Sununu. I'm actually a little bit curious to see how he does. He's not going to have nearly the money or resources, but Sununu actually won over a lot of Democrat voters in his governor's race last time. Biden won the state of New Hampshire with like 63% of the vote. Sununu won it with roughly 65% of the vote. So a lot of folks voted for Biden and Chris Sununu, who's a Republican in New Hampshire. He's a lot more, I don't agree with a lot of his policies still, but he's a lot more moderate, if you will, on issues like abortion, on some of the like social issues. He's more like, you do whatever you want as long as you're not bothering anybody else. If he were to like raise more money, he could probably get his name out there. The only reason I think he potentially gets some name recognition is I think he'll actually poll well in New Hampshire when he announces, but I don't know. We'll see. Right. But all that hurts DeSantis. The more people who are kind of throwing their names in and he starts to tank a little bit, other people's voices start to get out there. Trump-based voters are going to stick with Trump. The DeSantis voters are like kind of interested in DeSantis, but like maybe would vote for Trump, maybe would vote for somebody else.
Well, I also just think there's the issue. He ran an ad in 2018 reading his kids "Make America Great" books. I mean, Trump could just run that over and over and over again. I mean, it's completely emasculating. And it will basically show like this guy's full of shit. And so anyway,
I mean, Trump's going to torch DeSantis in every way possible, and he already is online. I mean, some of the Trump ads against DeSantis so far, and like the posts on social media and whatnot, have been hilarious, frankly. So he's winning on that. But yeah.
All right, Lewis has got to go. Thank you, sir. And you have another story coming out soon on East Palestine. So everybody, like we said, please, if you can, sign up because we want to send Lewis back, but these trips are expensive. So if you can, statuscoup.com/join, help fund these expensive trips to East Palestine and elsewhere. Thanks, Lewis.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jordan.
All right, let's read some super chats. Humorous, $10. So who's going to get this party started? Jordan needs 100,000 more members. I would take 10,000. That would be great. And at least $500,000 more money. Let's get it. Let's get on it, folks. He's the only one that cares. Why, thank you. Your check is in the mail. Thank you for that. Chris, $5. What humorist said? Mika Gelfand, $50. Thank you for covering environmental issues and how they impact local people. We got to do it. It's never going to go viral, but we got to do it. Zach Williams, $5 super sticker. Thank you. Appreciate it. Caitlin, I wonder if East Palestine will be a canary in the coal mine. Will this be enough for America to take notice of the power of corporations hold? Well, it depends if we're able to expose what actually happened. I don't think what actually happened has been made public. And I think it's very likely what actually happened is evil and corrupt, and way more corrupt and evil than we know yet, even though Lewis and I have been digging. I think the truth about what happened is, horror, just think of your worst James Bond villain, evil-esque. I think that might wake up more Americans if they learn something much more sinister about what happened here and what Norfolk Southern did. So that's why, I'm really hoping, even if one first responder has watched this show today and decides, you know what, I'm going to talk to Jordan or Lewis. And it doesn't even need to be on the record. We could just talk to you and use your information without identifying you. Remember, you had dozens of first responders, probably well over 100 first responders. So it's not like it's going to be easy to trace anything to any one person who talks to us. But it's really the only people that can really expose it are the people that were there. And when I say expose what was Norfolk Southern doing? Why were they doing it? Why were you sent away? Did that make sense? And also, people who have information on the quote unquote controlled burn, which we've already exposed was a clearly open detonation, which is against EPA regulations. All right. As of now, there's still a couple hours left in May. We've come short of our goal of 125 members. We're still 14 members away. So of the nearly 200 still watching, if there are some of you who have not signed up as a Status Coup member yet, I'm just going to once again ask directly, consider signing up, because honestly, what we're doing is very difficult. I could name only a few outlets that actually do any investigative reporting anywhere. I'm talking about independent outlets, truly independent outlets that are not, funded by corporate America or big Republican or Democratic donors. But it's very hard to fund actual on the ground reporting. Each trip costs us between $3,000 and $4,000, sometimes more if we stay longer. Then you got to pay Lewis. You got to pay Colin. Obviously, I need to make some money. Tina, Ron, Kim, who usually is on Wednesdays, but she had a family event today, so she couldn't be on. Whoever I'm forgetting that we pay. John Farina. So it is really expensive to do real independent on-the-ground reporting. I'm proud of the work we're doing. I want to do more, but we could only do it if we could pay people and pay for the cost of on-the-ground reporting. So if you could sign up, statuscoup.com/join, 16 cents a day. 16 cents a day comes out to $5 a month. If you become a $10 a month member, that's 33 cents a day. Consider it if you can. I would love to report tomorrow that we hit our goal. And we only need 14 more of you to sign up. So that's statuscoup.com/join. We're also going to have some new designs in our merchandise store for the summer coming up. So Colin's working on those. If there's anything else I'm forgetting, apologies. And hopefully we'll have some announcements coming up about where we're going next. It will be a lot easier if we keep growing the paid membership. So thank you. Thank you to Lewis. And we will see you back here tomorrow.